Let's get right to that breaking news. Iranian state media claiming the country struck an American vessel that was headed towards the Strait of Hormuz. But the U.S. military is pushing back on that claim. So here's what we know at this hour. U.S. Central Command says no U.S. Navy ships took any hits and that U.S. forces support a new mission that's called Project Freedom. Now, President Donald Trump announced that new plan over the weekend, and here's what we know about that. He's saying the American military guides ships through the strait, and anyone who interferes with the humanitarian process, as he calls it, faces being dealt with forcefully. So let's go live to CBS News national security contributor Aaron MacLean. Okay, so Aaron, right off the top, let's get to that bit of breaking news that we referenced there at the top of the broadcast. Our peers at the Associated Press right now are reporting that U.S. military helicopters have sunk some 6 Iranian boats. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it looks to me as though the Battle of Hormuz has begun. This is something that we've been contemplating as a possibility really since the start of this war on February the 28th. The Iranians closed the Strait of Hormuz shortly thereafter, cutting off about 10% of all global maritime traffic and 20% of the world's oil traffic. The president has tried through negotiations and threats to get the Iranians essentially to open it. Last night, he announced that this Project Freedom was going to be an American effort to begin opening it, and the Iranians have retaliated. So now it's a political decision. Will this conflict in the strait itself lead the Trump administration to suspending the ceasefire overall and returning to war more broadly? That's what we don't know yet.
It's certainly a fire going on right now. We're understanding that all of those Iranian boats were sunk by Apache and Seahawk helicopters, according to this breaking news. We understand also that Iran has used cruise missiles, drones, and small boats to try to disrupt things there in the strait. Are you seeing the emerging firepower? And let us know and let our viewers know what kind of firepower the Iranian forces face.
Well, they have these small boats. They have mines as well, and they retain a pretty substantial stock of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones with which, for example, they can hit the United Arab Emirates, which apparently they have been doing for the last several hours in a pretty sustained fashion. So they have some capabilities. And look, those capabilities are certainly enough to harass shipping in the strait. If you're sailing a commercial ship through the strait, getting machine gun from a small boat is definitely bad for crew morale and enough to give you second thoughts. But I don't advise taking one of those small boats into a tangle with a United States Navy guided missile destroyer, let alone our aviation assets. It's going to end badly for you, as it has ended badly for these 6 boats reportedly.
Lots of Davids out there on the water to the major Goliath of U.S. military force out there. And I would imagine that commanders have some red lines. Do you anticipate for our viewers what some of those red lines could be as we look at this battle in the strait?
Well, you know, the red line that's most of interest to me is what is the line in President Trump's head that has to be crossed before he considers the ceasefire over. You know, we've had no reports of American casualties or even of American ships getting struck today, not just the naval vessels, but also apparently the 2 American merchant vessels that made it out through the strait over the course of the last 24 hours as a part of Project Freedom. Is an American getting killed or an American vessel actually getting struck the end of the ceasefire? Is the UAE getting hit enough? Is the Iranian attempted interference enough? These are the questions on my mind right now, and I think the next few hours even are going to be extremely, extremely decisive.
Right, and I think that's important because people need to stay tuned to CBS News 24/7. We're going to have all of the breaking news as this happens. Give our viewers some sense of who's out there on the water. This is not just these Iranian small boats and the U.S. There are other people who are trying to navigate in the strait.
Gosh, I believe it's it's hundreds, if not thousands, of major commercial ships who are bottled up in the Persian Gulf, laden with various cargoes, whether it's oil or other things, that have been essentially trapped in there since the beginning of March. You've seen some efforts to run the blockade, the Iranian blockade of the strait. You've also seen some vessels coordinate with Iran, presumably pay a fine to get out. But the vast majority are stuck in there, not to mention all the ships that would like to get in there to pick up more cargo should commercial traffic be restored. So it's a crowd. It's a major problem for the global economy. It's also a major problem for the American economy. Gas prices are already elevated. We can anticipate they'll go higher if the strait remains closed. There was an interesting report just over the last 24 hours on the effects of the fact that America gets 10% of its aluminum from the Strait of Hormuz. So I don't know if you were planning on buying a Ford F-150 anytime soon, but those are made of aluminum. There's all kinds of strange effects that will come from the strait continuing to be closed, which is why it makes sense that the administration is beginning to attempt to force it open, and the Iranians do not like that.
It's a bottleneck and a boiling point. Aaron MacLean, always great to talk to you. We anticipate we'll be bringing you back a lot as we watch these developing news items out of the Strait of Hormuz. Thank you so much. Robert Murrett is a retired vice admiral. He is joining us right now, served the U.S. Navy, currently deputy director of Syracuse University's Institute for Security Policy and Law. That's a big title. First of all, right off the top, thank you so much for your legacy of service. Your reaction to this breaking news about our military sinking those Iranian boats?
Yeah, Reed, Aaron captured it pretty well, I think. I mean, this is a rapidly unfolding situation. I mean, just what we've seen the last couple, 3 hours has been fairly significant with attacks on both sides by Iran and by us trying to protect the ships, the two that we escorted and a couple of destroyers that we had going through the straits. A lot of takeaways from it. I mean, the first is the fact that the both sides, I mean, the Iranians, in fact, even announced after, I think just about an hour or so ago that they still wanted to control the straits. There's a lot of concerns from all the ships that are still bottled up in there. One of the other things, Reed, which we also just saw, is that one of the major shipping companies made an announcement that their risk assessment has been changed and they're not going to allow their ships to go through the straits based on the current situation. So it's pretty volatile. And as Aaron was saying, the next several hours and the overnight is important too. And just a final comment, it's getting dark over there right now, which I'm sure you know it's about 8 hours ahead of us. So what happens tonight over in the Straits of Hormuz will be critical.
Well, as somebody who has a military background, if you're in the room and you're advising those who are making these critical decisions that affect the lives of our men and women in service, what kind of advice do you give them with these tensions now at a boiling point there?
Well, I think the CENTCOM commander is doing a great job of that and having the escort, the capability. I'm sure the destroyers that did the transit were looking after the two ships which are escorted out of their original quarters the whole time. But they're very capable of defending themselves. And the air cover that they have, in addition, some of the reports have said a couple of the assets may have been rotary wing, shore-based or sea-based. And I'm sure there's some additional air cover there. So I think, the advice that we have is to make sure that we have all the protection for the units that are in there. And at the same time, from a, calculated standpoint, that we are engaging as we need to the six sunk Iranian ships that were just reported within the last hour or so, and defending whatever units that we need to escort through or protect going through the streets.
For our viewers just joining us right now, we're getting that breaking news that the U.S., through some military helicopters, has sunk about 6 small Iranian boats. Robert Murrett, thank you so much for your wisdom and your background on this story as it develops. Let's go to the White House now and CBS News' Aaron Navarro. So, Aaron, what does this mean in terms of getting people to the table for a ceasefire?
Reed, if you ask the head of U.S. Central Command, Brad Cooper, what it means, he says at this moment he doesn't know. And that's what he was asked, and that's what he answered at a press conference just this hour. He said he would not go into details on if the ceasefire is over or not, and that CENTCOM and the U.S. military is merely there as a defensive force. Some other notes on this breaking news that we've gotten about 6 Iranian small boats that were sunk by U.S. helicopters. Cooper told reporters that Iran had used cruise missiles, drones, and small boats to try and disrupt the mission of Project Freedom, of escorting ships that have been stranded in the Strait of Hormuz from countries that were not involved in this war that President Trump announced began today. He also added that no U.S. flagged ships or U.S. warships have been hit. And just to get to Project Freedom, which President Trump announced this past weekend, the reasoning, at least in Truth Social, in a long post that he framed it as, was that it came at the request of countries who were not involved with this war, and that it was to help ships that were maybe running out of food or running into unsanitary conditions. He said that it would be a humanitarian gesture on behalf of Iran, but as we're seeing today, Iran disagrees with this operation. They've said so in many recent posts, and we're seeing throughout the day through their actions as well.
Well, we know, of course, the intention has been to get President Trump's special envoy, his son-in-law, and others over there to continue peace talks. With this new and developing news about the U.S. helicopters sinking some Iranian ships, are there any other voices in the room other than the ones that have been having these conversations?
Well, we know that one newer addition to the team with Jared Kushner and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is lobbyist Nick Stewart, who is supporting them as a policy expert. He actually traveled with them during their last trip to Pakistan, where Vice President Vance also attended sometime in April. And he is listed in doing several lobbying gigs regarding Iranian and Russian sanctions. But in terms of the negotiations themselves, last week President Trump said that most of this is happening over the phone. He doesn't feel the need to be sending a U.S. delegation all the way to Pakistan to Islamabad to hear a proposal that he won't like. We know that there is a 14-point proposal that Iran proposed last weekend, which looked to end the war completely instead of extending the ceasefire. It also sets a 30-day window for the two countries to resolve any issues. President Trump did not seem too optimistic about it, saying he's studying it, but he's unsure if he can make a deal with Iran, citing some of the actions that they've had stemming back from their response to protesters in the country. There have also been reports that the U.S. recently sent a counterproposal to Iran and that Iran is currently reviewing that. We will see if this latest escalation in the Strait of Hormuz impacts any of those negotiations.
Aaron Navarro following all these breaking details as we learn the U.S. military helicopters have sunk 6 Iranian small boats out there. Thank you so much.